I'm very happy to be with each of you here once again as we study a very important message, and this message has to do with the gospel invitation. When we think about our purpose as a church, why are we here? What is the reason why we exist? We know the verse in Mark 16, "Go ye into all the world and preach the gospel to every creature." We're familiar with this message, go into all the world. And when you think of going into all the world, what comes to your mind? What's the first thing that comes to your mind? We often think of foreign missions and things of that nature. But one thing for sure is that when you give your heart to the Lord, something happens instantly. And what happens instantly? The moment you give your heart to the Lord, it says, to everyone who becomes a partaker of His grace, the Lord appoints a work for others. You can't survive without working for others. This is why when we read, "Go ye into all the world and preach the gospel to every creature," it means every one of us. We have a work to do for other people. When you stop working for other people, you begin to die. In reality, that's what happens. And that's the same thing in life. When you want to decide, I'm only going to work for myself, I'm only going to take care of myself, what happens? If you only want to take care of yourself, you'll soon begin to die. That's a natural course of things. You don't help anybody out. Of course, if you don't do anything for anybody, you can't get wages. I mean, in reality, it's self-destructive. So the Lord appoints a work for others. And when we think of the work for others, the message, it says in Revelation 22 and verse 17, "And the Spirit and the bride say, Come, and let him that heareth say, Come, and let him that is athirst, and whosoever will, let him take the water of life freely." So who is this invitation given to? When we take a look at people in the world, who is it given to? It's actually given to every single human being. Everyone this message is given to. When we think of people that are left out, sometimes we look at somebody and we say, "Oh, they're not interested." Isn't that what happens? You look at a wealthy house, "Oh, they're not interested." You look at some other, "Oh, they're not interested." In reality, no one is left out. Upon all the inhabitants of the earth, high and low, rich and poor, was the light of heaven to shine in clear, strong rays. The disciples were to be co-laborers with their Redeemer in the work of saving the world. That is our responsibility. When we look at Jesus, oftentimes the church people, even His own disciples, looked at Jesus and they felt that He was mingling with the wrong crowd. Doesn't that happen often? He's not mingling with the right people. In Matthew 9:11, it says that, "And it came to pass, as Jesus sat at meat in the house, behold, many publicans and sinners came and sat down with Him and His disciples." Publicans were the most hated. They were basically tax collectors. But unlike tax collectors today, they were tax collectors for an oppressive regime. The Romans were very oppressive. They were a very tyrannical government, especially on nations that they conquered. Nations they gave up easily was much better for them. But if a nation resisted, they were treated very harshly. The Jews resisted, so they were treated very harshly. And then a publican was usually a Jew too. So imagine this tax collector being one of your own people there to collect taxes for this oppressive regime. How would you feel? That brings up some resentment. And not only that, these publicans became wealthy overnight. How? Because once they became part of an oppressive regime, they imbibed the same spirit. And so they would collect a lot more taxes. And you had no recourse. There was no appeal. You could appeal to the Roman government, but the Roman government, they're interested in how much taxes they collect. And you go to the judge, and the judge gets part of the collections there, and what happens? There is no recourse. And Jesus sat with these people. Yeah, Jesus came in the midst of these very hated group of people, and he sat with them and sinners, and he sat down with them. You see, this is not acceptable behavior. And when we look at Christ's concern was who? Sinners were the special objects of the mission of Christ. Sinners of every race and clime, all are dear to him because they are the purchase of his blood. When you purchase something, it doesn't matter where you purchase it. It doesn't matter which neighborhood you're in. You treasure it. Why? Because you did what? You purchased it. And what did Jesus purchase? He purchased people. What kind of people? Every people, all people. You know, this is the thing when you look at, when you look at nations, when you look at wars, when there's a war, what happens? You start, in your mind, start taking side. And yet, Jesus purchased every one of those people. It doesn't matter what they are. The cases that seem the most hopeless are to be labored for, the most earnestly in faith and hope and earnest prayer. Do we consider people hopeless? Oh, that one's hopeless. Well, what does it mean when you identify a person as hopeless? That's the one actually you need to start working with. Now, I'm not going to talk this morning about the evangelism we need to do in the world. That is something that we often speak about. But there are 3 parables that Jesus gave that actually apply to those within the church. When you think of evangelism, you think of outreach. And many times if you think of within the church evangelism, people think, oh, well, you're wasting your time. Many times even I've seen Bible workers give Bible studies to somebody in the church, and they're told, hey, wait a minute now, that's not what you're paid for. Okay, you're paid for evangelizing. And yet Jesus devoted 3 parables to this purpose. Now, when we look at the parables of Christ in Luke 19:10, he explains the reason for these parables. And it says here, for the Son of Man is come to do what? To seek and to save that which is lost. So even within that church capacity, you see. You have the parable of the lost sheep. That's the first parable. But you have the parable of the lost sheep. You have the parable of the lost coin. You have the parable of the prodigal son. And they bring out in distinct lines God pitying love for those who are erring and straying from him. Although following their own course of action in turning away from God, he does not leave them in their misery. You know, when we look at the parable of the prodigal son, and this week, those of us who were in the youth program there, we had a couple of studies on the parable of the prodigal son. In this case here, the son made a choice. He chose to leave the father. That's what the choice that he made. He knows that he is lost, and he knows to find his way back home. He knows all of that. If you asked him out in the distance over there, if you asked him about the faith, he can tell you everything about the faith. Okay, when he's sitting there with the pigs, he decides this is enough, and what does he do? He decides to come home, and he comes home by himself, actually. Excuse me. No one goes out looking for him, actually. The elder brother should have probably went out looking for him, but he didn't. You know, the elder brother probably would have had some influence. But nonetheless, no one went looking for him, and he finds his own way back home. And there's many lessons you can learn on that one, but that's not our topic today. You also have the parable of the lost sheep. Now, the lost sheep also chose to get lost, in a sense. I mean, not consciously. He was busy doing other things. He didn't decide, I am going to leave this fold. No, he doesn't do that. He is busy doing his own thing. He is busy eating, busy looking at something else. And next thing he looks up, and guess what? He is all alone, and he is lost. And the moment he identifies that, he recognizes that he is lost. The only difficult thing with a lost sheep, different than the prodigal son, is that he doesn't know how to get back home. Now, he knows he's lost, he knows his condition, but he does not know how to get back. And of course, the only way to bring the lost sheep home is you have to go look for him. You have to identify that he's lost and then go take time to find him. Now, then there is the parable of the lost coin. And I'd like to spend a little bit of time on this subject a little bit more. When you lose a coin, if you lose a quarter, I mean, how much time are you going to spend looking for a quarter? You lose a quarter, how much time will you actually spend? You know, even if you're doing bookkeeping, if you're doing bookkeeping and you lose a quarter, what do? How much time are you going to spend looking for it? Or you take a quarter and you put it in. There it is. It's done. Isn't that? I mean, that's what you're not going to go look for it. I mean, come on. You're going to spend how many hours looking for it? You know, if you're being paid so much an hour, you're going to spend time looking for 25 cents? Okay, you're really not going to do a lot, okay? I remember years ago when I began doing treasury work, yeah, we had to look for 1 penny. We had to spend 2 days looking for the penny, you know? And eventually I realized, you know, this is really, this is not worth my time, you know? Throw the penny in, do something. So you see, when we're looking at this parable of the lost coin, sometimes we don't realize how important it is because we think of a coin, who cares, you know? Who cares about this coin? But let's read the parable first. You find this in Luke chapter 15, and we'll read verses 8 to 10. It says, either what woman having 10 pieces of silver, if she lose 1 piece, doth not light a candle and sweep the house and seek diligently till she find it? And when she had found it, she calleth her friends and her neighbors together, saying, rejoice with me, for I have found the piece which I had lost. Likewise, I say unto you, there is joy in the presence of the angels of God over one sinner that repenteth. And by the way, this last part here, on each of the cases, whether it's the lost sheep, whether it's the lost coin, whether it's the prodigal son, there is joy in heaven over one sinner that repenteth. And this is not even talking about going out to evangelize, okay? All of these cases actually are in the fold. The sheep used to be in the fold, okay? The prodigal son, he was in the home, okay? And the lost coin is where? It's lost where? It's not lost somewhere out there. It's lost right here. You know, this is the question here. You know, so first of all, let's talk about the value of the coin, so we can have a proper perspective. Like I said, you lose a penny, you lose a quarter. I mean, come on, you lose a silver dollar. It's like big whoopee do nowadays, okay? What can you do that with a dollar? You know, the other day I went to go buy a piece of plywood, you know, those, what do you call it? Those cheaper plywood, okay? The OSB plywood, yeah, the OSB plywood. You know, I used to pay $7.50 for that plywood, you know. And I went the other day to Home Depot and it was like $54, okay. That same piece of plywood, okay. Now, suddenly you start looking at, expensive things, okay. So things have changed in value, okay. So when a quarter, a dollar, how much is the dollar going to buy? You know, how far will a dollar get you nowadays? You even go to the restaurant, and I don't know if you notice, the price is going up. In the restaurant, everything's going up. So $1, you're looking at that, it's like no big deal, you see. So, but let's talk about this coin here. And the way I can explain this coin is a little bit talking about marriage first. Okay, marriage back in the days, you know, if you were interested, if a guy was interested in a girl, he didn't just go there and say, look, I love you, and say a bunch of lovely things. Here's a couple of flowers, and they're getting married. Now, that's not how it worked back in those days, okay? Back in those days, in the case of Jacob, Jacob says he loved Rachel. And he said, what? I will serve 7 years for Rachel, the younger daughter. Can you imagine that? You know, can you imagine placing yourself into servitude? For what? For how long? 7 years. There's got to be some value there. If I'm going to give up 7 years of my life for this woman, before you start dating, that's out of the question, okay? No dating, nothing. You serve 7 years, and then you can think about it, okay? That's how it was back in those days. All right, so now, this 7 years, okay, when you look at the dowry, what was the purpose of the dowry? And today, people misunderstand a lot of things about the original purpose of the dowry. In early times, custom required the bridegroom, before the ratification of a marriage engagement, this is before even the engagement, to pay a sum of money or its equivalent in other property according to his circumstances to the father of his wife. This was regarded as a safeguard to the marriage relation. I want you to think about it. This actually protected the marriage. Why? Because they wanted to see that this marriage is an appropriate marriage. Fathers did not think it safe to trust the happiness of their daughters to men who had not made provision for the support of a family. If they had not sufficient thrift and energy to manage business and acquire cattle or lands, it was feared that their life would prove worthless. So if you haven't been able to do this, if you are not able to provide a place for your family to live in, if you can't do that, then they're afraid that this is going to be worthless, okay? And you find a lot of places today. I have known a lot of young ladies who end up being the breadwinner in their homes, okay? And the man is doing nothing, actually. I mean, some men, they actually go and do some work in the house and they take up those responsibilities. But I found men do absolutely nothing all day long. And the wife comes home and, she has to prepare the meal. I mean, can you imagine that? She's working out all day. She has to prepare the meal. She has to clean the house. Okay, and the man just sitting there as what, okay? So this was the concern that they had. Now, obviously, not everyone had means. It says, but provision was made to test those who had nothing to pay for a wife. They were permitted to labor for the father whose daughter they loved, the length of time being regulated by the value of the dowry required. So it depends on what the value is expected to be. You are going to have to work for that period of time. And in the case of Jacob, that was 7 years. Now, when we look at that, okay, so you're thinking, okay, man, what a thing, imagine being a girl living in those days. I mean, do you feel like you'd be sold by your parents by, requiring a dowry? Is that what it was? In reality, it was not being sold. I want you to pay attention to this verse. And this verse gives an idea of what the dowry was supposed to do. In Genesis 31, it says, and Rachel and Leah answered and said unto him, is there yet any portion or inheritance for us in our father's house? By the way, did women get an inheritance back in those days? If you're a woman, you get how much inheritance? Actually, nothing. You don't get an inheritance, okay? And now notice this, verse 15. Are we not counted of him as strangers? For he had sold us and had quite devoured also our money. Now, what does this mean? Well, first of all, a dowry was not selling your daughter. Okay, that was not the purpose of the dowry. And it says here, he had what? He had devoured our money. In other words, when the suitor was faithful in his services and proved in other respects worthy, he obtained the daughter as his wife. And generally, the dowry which the father had received was given her at her marriage. That actually was her inheritance. That belonged to her. And so, based on the value, the father said, okay, this is the value of my daughter. And so now you have to give that value. And then when she got married, what happened? That actually belonged to her. Okay, it was her money. It was not the husband's money anymore, by the way. It did not belong to him. You hear all these discussions about women and the women's rights and all these type of things, what women should do. Should they have careers? Should they stay at home and all these type of things? And it's interesting from a biblical perspective what happened. When a woman received this dowry, notice Proverbs 31. When it talks about the virtuous woman. It says in verse 10, who can find a virtuous woman, for her price is far above rubies. This is describing her. And now notice verse 16. Verse 16, she considereth a field and buyeth it. With the fruit of her hands she planted a vineyard. How did she buy this field? How did she buy this field? Yeah, the dowry money was hers. She obviously, in this case, what did she do with it? She invested it. Okay, she saw a field. She was able to buy the field. This doesn't have the husband, actually, you read the story there. The husband's there sitting at the gate of the city. Okay, he's there with the elders doing all this type of thing, you know. And yet she is the one capable. And you think in the Bible, all women were not supposed to do anything. No, she actually bought the field herself. She goes there, she evaluates the field, she plants the vineyard. I mean, she's running this whole vineyard, she's running this whole thing, okay? And it is hers. And what does she do with it? What does she do with all this stuff? What is she supposed to do with it? You know, notice here, after investing it, notice here, the wife's marriage portion usually consisted of pieces of money, which she carefully preserved as her most cherished possession to be transmitted to her own daughters. And you don't hear about this too much, okay? You hear all about the man giving the firstborn son and the second son and giving them all this type of stuff. And you don't hear the women transmitted this as a legacy to their own daughters so that the daughters are actually protected. You know, but you have a woman like this, has her own business, has her own thing there, and some guy tells her, get lost, and she's like, oh, you know, he tries to abuse her. She's not going to be cowering in the corner, fearing that she's going to be left desolate. She's going to say, hey, I can handle myself. Right? It would change a lot of things. You see, so it was transmitted to her daughters. Now, some of it she invested sometimes, and what happens if she loses it? What happens if she loses part of her dowry? The loss of one of these pieces would be regarded as a serious calamity, and its recovery would cause great rejoicing, in which the neighboring women would readily share. So if a woman lost the coin, and then she found that this piece of silver, which was of greater value than $1 or a quarter or something like that, this was something of great value. In this case, she had 10 of them. And now she maybe, you know, how did she know she lost it? Probably she was ready to invest in something, and guess what? She knows she has 10 of them, and she has only what? She finds only 9, and she's getting ready for this next thing, and she has only 9. Okay, that's how you start finding things, isn't it? You don't look for things when you don't miss it. When you need something, what do? That's when you start looking for it, you see. And so this is what happened then. And so she lost only one piece of coin. Now, why was it such a diligent search for one coin? It was of great value. Okay, like I said, you lose a quarter, you're not going to go spend a lot of time on it. You lose $1 nowadays, it's like, okay, I lost $1, I feel sorry for it. You know, you can buy what with $1? I mean, you go to the store, what can you buy for $1? Okay, I go to these 99-cent stores, okay, and they're not even 99 cents, okay, anymore. Okay, yeah, that's you can't buy things with stuff like that, okay. But this coin obviously had great value. You see, the coin, though lying amidst the dust and rubbish, is a piece of silver still. Yeah, it's still silver, okay, so it's a silver coin. Its owner seeks it because of its value. Again, you don't seek for something you don't consider a value. You know, if you lost a penny, you're not going to spend a lot of time looking for it. I guarantee you that. But if you lost $100, you know, you start looking for things. Okay, where did it go? Okay. Its owner seeks it because of its value. So every soul, however degraded by sin, is in God's sight accounted precious. The thing is, that coin is where? It is there in the dust. It is there in the mud and in the grime, and yet that coin has what? It has value. This is the point. It has value. As the coin bears the image and superscription of the reigning power, so man at his creation bore the image and superscription of God. And though now marred and dimmed through the influence of sin, the traces of this inscription remain upon every soul. I look at a lot of young people in different programs that we run, and some of them are just so obsessed with the world. They don't want to have anything to do with God, nothing in this church, nothing. They're looking forward to their liberation, to get out of this environment so they can be free. and some of them go out there, and some of them have really destroyed their life, and you see them destroying their life, and yet what should we be able to see in them when they're destroying their life? There's still the inscription of God there. They still have that value. And that's why God desires to recover that soul and retrace upon it his own image in righteousness and holiness. God wants to clarify it. So when you take an old coin like that, sometimes it's all, you can see nothing on there. So you begin cleaning it up, don't you? And what do you finally see? You finally see the inscription again. So how is it possible for us to be able to understand the value of a soul? That's for every one of us, including some of us. I mean, maybe some of you are lost. Some of you are this lost coin. And I want you to understand something. To understand the value of the soul, you need to go to the Garden of Gethsemane. When Jesus, it says there, he went again the second time and prayed, saying, "Oh, my Father, if this cup may not pass away from me except I drink it, thy will be done." It is in the Garden of Gethsemane. This is where Jesus prayed that prayer. And this is where you begin to see the value. When you look at the value of something, sometimes you may see something being sold. And you look at that thing and you think, well, this has no value in it. And suddenly it goes on an auction and it gets a high price. What do you do now? Oh, what did we miss? Why didn't I buy that? Yeah? Why didn't I look at that and say, I want to buy this thing? Yeah, sometimes pieces of land, they look worthless. They have no value in it, and somebody wants to throw it away. And then next thing is they purchase it for millions of dollars. And you're like, what? I could have had that for a mere nothing. I know there in Sydney, when a lot of people were moving in to Sydney, and on the beaches, the North Beaches, it was a desolate wilderness. Nobody wanted to buy it. And some people from Eastern Europe came and they bought up these huge sections of it, And now, they sell that stuff by the square centimeter practically. It's these little bitty little places. And then when I went first to Sydney, and I thought, let me go look at an auction. And so I went to this auction house, and they were selling an apartment. They were selling an apartment. It was like a 300 meters apartment. So that's like what? 900 square feet, maybe 1,000 square feet, a foot apartment. And I'm sitting there listening there, going through the thing, and I'm thinking, what's it going to go for? It must be a good deal. There was this Chinese lady there, and she was bidding on that thing. And by the time she got done, she got it for $1.3 million. Okay, suddenly you look at it, what on earth is this? Okay, so that's what happens with value. When you don't understand it, when you start studying into it, then you begin to find what? You begin to find value. The value of the soul, who can estimate? Would you know its worth? Go to Gethsemane and there watch with Christ through those hours of anguish when he sweat as it were great drops of blood. Look upon the Savior uplifted on the cross. Hear the despairing cry, my God, why hast thou forsaken me? Look upon the wounded head, the pierced side, the marred feet. Remember that Christ risked all. For our redemption, heaven itself was imperiled. Yeah, when Christ went to the cross, the entire universe was in danger. It was imperiled, and he took that risk. Why? You don't take risk for something that has no value. You take risk for something that you believe has value. Again, if there is no value, you don't take risks. You're not prepared to risk anything for it. But at the foot of the cross, remembering that for one sinner, Christ would have laid down his life, you may estimate the value of a soul. And some of you, I know I've been talking to some of you, and maybe this applies to others. Some of you don't understand the value of your soul. You don't understand how much Christ has invested for your salvation. He has done all of this. And when you understand that, then we are prepared to invest. Until then, we're not. We're not ready to invest, you see. And by the way, again, where is the coin lost? This coin is not lost somewhere way out there. It's actually in the house. It's right in the house of the person. And this means in the church, there are people lost right in the church. You see, The piece of silver was lost in the house. It was close at hand. You don't have to go on a mission trip somewhere. You don't have to go into some foreign country. When you think of missionaries, you think of foreign countries, and so many people sit there, fold their hands and say, "Oh, I'd love to be a foreign missionary." Why? Because they're not going anywhere. And they do nothing. They talk all about how wonderful it would be on the foreign mission field and everything else, and they do nothing. They don't look at people that are right around the corner. They don't look at them. And you see, these are people that are at hand, yet it could be recovered only by diligent search. People say, "Oh, there's no souls there." Why are there no souls there? Because you're not looking. All you see is dust and grime and everything else. And there's coins there. There are lost coins right there. So there are souls right here to be worked. This parable has a lesson for families. In the household, there is often great carelessness concerning the souls of its members. We don't take time for the people that are growing up among us. Among their number may be one who is estranged from God, but how little anxiety is felt in the family relationship. There be lost one of God's entrusted gifts. Right inside our families, inside homes. You see, there are fathers and mothers who long to labor in some foreign mission field. There are many who are active in Christian work outside the home, while their own children are strangers to the Savior and His love. People growing up right around us, and we're just totally neglecting. The work of winning their children for Christ may present many parents' trust to the minister or the Sabbath school teacher, but in doing this, they are neglecting their own God-given responsibility. We have people among ourselves. The education and training of their children to be Christians is the highest service that parents can render to God. And I've even seen parents who are totally ignorant of their own situation, totally lacking anything, and then they have a baby born. And suddenly it's like, whoa, what is this now? Suddenly you're responsible for this child. And I've seen a lot of young people, they have their first child and they give their heart to the Lord. Why? Because they sense that responsibility. It is a work that demands patient labor, a lifelong, diligent, and persevering effort. By a neglect of this trust, we prove ourselves unfaithful stewards. No excuse for such neglect will be accepted by God. Last time, a couple of weeks ago, we talked about transformed heart, transformed home. This is the same type of principle here. Now, the people that are lost, the lost coin, they're not the lost prodigal son. Okay, they're not the same as that. They're not the lost sheep. The lost coin represents those who are lost in trespasses and sins, but who have no sense of their condition. They think they're fine. I talk to some people, you can see their spiritual life is in shambles, and you ask them, "How are you doing?" They said, "Wonderful, I'm doing fine." And you look at them and your soul bleeds, your heart bleeds for them, and they think that they're doing fine. They're estranged from God, but they know it not. Their souls are in peril, but they're unconscious, and not only are they unconscious, what else? They're unconcerned, they don't care. You talk to them about their soul, and they say, I don't care, I'm fine. That's the lost coin. The prodigal son, when he's having a party, he's not thinking about anything. He doesn't need anything else. But when he runs out of money, then he starts thinking about things, isn't it? When you have nothing to eat, that's a really great thing to wake you up, okay? When there's no food to eat and you don't have anything to eat for a meal or two is sometimes all right, I've been to some countries, and they have nothing to eat. They have a fellowship lunch, and fellowship lunch, they decided to be really nice to me, and they gave me a whole slice of bread for lunch and 2 bananas. I've been places, that's all they had. And they're apologizing, "Oh, we're so sorry, we don't have anything else." And you see, they can't afford anything else. And it's like, tell them, I said, "Look, don't worry about me. I got 2 weeks in reserve here. I'll be fine." I'm okay, so don't worry about that. But some of them, you look at them, they don't have any reserves. They miss 1 meal and that's it. But what happens when you're unconscious and unconcerned? Some of the people there, how do they take things there, and they take these medications or something, and their minds are numb, and they're starving and they don't even know it. And so they're unconcerned. In this parable, Christ teaches that even those who are indifferent, those who don't care to the claims of God, are the object of his pitying love. They are to be sought for, that they may be brought back to God. Sometimes I've had youth conventions, and I've had young people, they were so indifferent and so don't care. They came and told me right up front, I don't want to be here. I'm only here because my parents forced me to be here. So I just want you to know that. And all I tell them is, praise the Lord. Now, what do you mean, praise the Lord? Well, it means you're here. That means you're here. That means we got work to do. And so let's get busy starting to work here. You see, because even if they're indifferent, even if they don't care, we have a work for them. So how do you reach a lost coin? How do we, who are in this case represented by the woman here in the house, how do we reach a lost coin? What's the first thing you need to do? What is it? Okay, so obviously on your part, you need to know you're missing it. Okay, so when you recognize it's missing, what's the first thing you need to do?
You got to pray to God to give you guidance.
Okay, so how does God give you guidance? What do you need to do?
By humbling yourself.
Are you ready for this verse? We read it earlier. We read this verse a few times. I want you to pay attention here. What has to be done? And this may shock some of us. Okay, when we're looking out, reaching for souls, we don't realize this is the first work. It says here, either what woman having 10 pieces of silver, if she had lost one piece, doth not light a candle. And so first thing is light a candle. Secondly is what? Whose house?
My house.
Are you unclean? Are you the one that's dirty? You're saying the other one's lost, okay, but are you the one that's dirty? I want you to look at this carefully. You see, and matter of fact, you don't know your house is dirty. Actually, we don't know our house is dirty. Do you know why? What do we need to do? How do you get to know that your house is dirty? How do you know that you, as a good Christian, a model Christian in the church, that your house is dirty? How do you get to know that? Huh? Turn the light on. It says here, first of all, light the candle. Because you see, in the East, the houses of the poor usually consisted of but one room, often windowless and dark. The room was rarely swept, and a piece of money falling on the floor would be speedily covered by the dust and rubbish. In order that it might be found, even in the daytime, a candle must be lighted and the house must be swept diligently. Now, what's the candle? What do we need to do? What's the first thing we need to do? Light the candle, and the candle is, thy word is a lamp unto my feet and a light unto my path. That means we need personal Bible study. Not personal Bible study to tell someone where they're wrong. We're experts at that. That's easy. That's easy to go and find and show there, hey, you're doing this and this wrong. That's an easy thing to do. But here, the purpose of lighting the candle is to examine myself. Search the Word of God, and by its light let everything, where? In the home be diligently examined, to see why this child is lost. Let parents search their own hearts, examine their habits and practices. Are there some of my habits? Are there some of my practices that is leading others astray? This is the question that we have to ask ourselves. You know, the unfortunate thing is, a lot of times, young people may even think of coming back. But unfortunately, here we often act like a Pharisee. Now, when the Pharisees which had bidden him saw it, he spake He spake within himself, saying, This man, if he were a prophet, would have known who and what manner of woman this is that toucheth him, for she is a sinner. Can you imagine that? You know, I was talking to a young lady not long ago, and she definitely said she's never coming back to our church. That's definitely out of the question. Don't want to hear about it. Don't want to hear about religion, all that kind of stuff. But, you know, I have a good relationship with her. So she said, I don't understand this. I hate your church, you know, and yet you're my friend, you know, and you're their minister. And so I think, you know, we're getting somewhere. Anyway, I told her, anyway, I'm hoping. I don't care what you say, but I have a hope. And one day she told me, you know, if I were to come back, I said, now we're getting there. Now we're getting somewhere. We're now turning around somewhere. But you know what her fear is of treated like this? Her fear. You know, even when it crossed her mind, she says, they're not going to want me back. You know, and unfortunately, many times this is true. You know, someone comes back and what do you tell them? You see, I'm so happy to see you, or that's about time you come back. You know, I knew you're going to go out there long enough and you're going to see something. Yeah, our attitude. And this is why we need to sweep our own house. When you understand the value of the soul, what happens? You're broken. And when you find the soul coming back, wow, that's rejoicing. Our inhumanity, listen to this, our inhumanity towards others is our greatest sin. It's the amazing thing. You know, so this is talking about those within the house. This is not talking about those out in the world. It's talking about us. Our inhumanity towards others is our greatest sin. Many think that they are representing the justice of God, while they wholly fail to represent His tenderness and His great love. You know, some of us are so eager to deal with justice. This is justice. We got to hold up the principle. We got to do, you can go on and on and on. We can find every other thing except one thing, that there happens to be what? Tenderness and love of God. And you can't get there until we sweep our own house. Can't get there until we recognize ourselves, that our house needs cleaning. Often the ones whom they treat with sternness and severity are under stress of temptation. Satan is wrestling with these souls, and harsh, unsympathetic words discourage them and cause them to fall a prey to the tempter's power. In other words, the way we talk to them, they go even deeper, and we say, see, I told you they're going to go like that. Yeah, well, we knew that already. We don't realize it was our words that did it. And how do you know your words? Because you can't tell. Someone can't tell you you were unsympathetic. Someone can't tell you said pretty mean things there. You can't tell anybody that. You'll just start justifying yourself. The only way we can understand that is by turning the light on. Yeah, and begin what? What do I need to sweep to be able to understand this? She removes everything that might obstruct her search. On the part of all the others, let there be diligent, careful self-examination. Let the life practice be investigated. Examining ourselves. See if there is not some mistake, some error in management by which that soul is confirmed in impenitence. Examine ourselves. This whole issue has to deal with examination. In conclusion, we're not dealing with only $0.25, you know, so we're looking at something quite more expensive than that. Something a lot more valuable. And when we look at this whole issue, sometimes we look at our situation, we think it's impossible. And I keep remembering this verse in Philippians 4:13, I can do all things through Christ which strengtheneth me. Yeah, so right now, whether you're one of those lost coins listening with indifference right now, whether you are the householder thinking, I can never change all this stuff, I made such a big mess. It doesn't matter which category you're in. There is hope because Jesus says, what? Through Apostle Paul, I can do all things through Christ which strengtheneth me. But those who have been guilty of neglect are not to despair. The woman whose coin was lost searched until she found it. So in love, faith, and prayer, let parents work for their households until with joy they can come to God saying, behold, I am the children whom the Lord hath given me. What a wonderful hope that we have there. You know, before Jesus gave the Great Commission, in Matthew 28, you'll see there the Great Commission is there. And just before he gives us that Great Commission, he says what? All power in heaven is given unto me in heaven and in earth. And why does he have all that power? Because he wants to use it in the salvation of souls. So in this work, all angels of heaven are ready to cooperate. All the resources of heaven are at our command, at the command of those who are seeking to save the lost. Angels will help you to reach the most careless and the most hardened. You know, I'll never forget the story of an experience years ago. I remember I was having studies with this family, and they asked me for some really strong evidences. And I was about 20 years old, maybe 21 at the most. I was working there in Washington, D.C., and this family asked for these evidences, and I was so eager, I was full of zeal. I gave them the evidences. I showed them clearly from the Bible, clearly the message, and they looked at that. And at the end of that study, I thought this will convince anybody, and they looked at me, and they said, we never want to see you again. Man, I was shocked. They said, we don't want any more Bible studies. Don't call us. And we don't want to call you. We're done. I was so disappointed. I just started working there, you know. It was my only Bible study that I had that was regular, you know. And now you have none, you know, and you're going out from door to door, you know, doing different things, and you're wondering, boy, what has happened? What have I done? I began praying the Lord, what have I done? What mistake? And then I looked at that, and I was answering a question. I wasn't going out of my way to knock them out or anything, you know. But here they said they don't want to see me again. Anyway, about a month later, I got a phone call, and the lady says, I am sick and tired of this. Sick and tired of what, you know? She told me not to call her, not to talk to her. I didn't. And now she's sick and tired of this. So what are you sick and tired of? She says, I am totally sick of this. Sick of what? So I'm driving down the road, and I hear this voice saying, give Brother Peter a call. Just, I'm minding my own business, eating my breakfast. Give Brother Peter a call. I'm going to work. Give Brother Peter a call. I want to go to sleep. Give Brother Peter a call. She says, I'm tired of this. You see, we're not working alone. This is the amazing thing, is we're not working alone. You know, when you look at the difficult cases and you're praying to the Lord is working out there. In that case, that was pretty quick. I mean, that was a month, okay? I've had cases that go on for years and years and years and years. And the Lord is still out there working with the hearts. And he brings them into circumstances where they have to come to the point of surrender. And finally, they're willing to come home. And may the Lord help each one of us that we begin in this parable of the lost coin, that we begin by examining our hearts. Turn the light on, and not losing hope that there is a God in heaven that is willing to work for the salvation of sinners is my prayer. Amen.